Talk first about a couple of principles to keep in mind while we're doing all the moves today. What's going to make this Kimura effective? Don't resist me. Watch this, guys. Whenever I go for Kimura, there's a couple things that I have to understand about controlling my partner and being able to finish and actually break the shoulder. And three things are going to kind of come into play at different points in the day. So just kind of watch this. The first one is, if I go to lock a Kimura on somebody and I just have a grip like so, a lot of his defenses are going to come from movement of his head. So if his head can just easily come up and just sit up, like straight up. Look, if his head can come up, look, he can start to off balance me. If I'm sitting like this, sit on your side, and I'm like this, his head coming up and sitting up can help like throw off my Kimura. So one thing we're going to always keep in mind is how we're going to control the head. For instance, just an example is this. Like I said, if he was here and I did it like I did a second ago, he could get out. But if I was sitting on his head, when I control his head, it limits his movement to where now I can get a nice break on the shoulder. The second is if I look at the arm here, if you drew a line between the shoulders, okay, the lower his elbow is under the shoulder line, the less breaking power I'll have. So in all of our Kimuras, we're looking to bring that elbow up to the shoulder line. If I can get them all three in a line, there's going to be a lot of pressure on the shoulder. And one big thing that a lot of people don't realize is I've seen people say that you can't Kimura people like this with their arms almost straight. I've seen people say you don't want the arm bent all the way. People say different things, but it really doesn't matter where the arm, how bent the arm is. It's about the shoulder line. Because right here, look, if I get this and I start trying to crank this, it doesn't hurt as bad as if I do this. And now when I start to do that same Kimura, it's a lot tighter on him just from bringing his elbow up to the shoulder line. The third thing, eventually, if we can't get through and get the hand behind the back, we're going to end up involving our legs in different ways. You got to get creative sometimes. So let's say I'm in a position like this, but I can't separate his arms and get the break. I could step over and use my leg to help break that Kimura through, you see? Okay? So in different spots during this talk, we're going to talk about these three elements. How am I going to control the head? How am I going to bring the elbow up to the shoulder line? And how, if I can't break through that, will I use my legs? And it may not even be my leg on the arm. My legs locking around his body in different ways will help get the breaking power I need. So just look for those things as we go through here. Now let's talk about what we're going to do to how we're going to break this arm now. If I'm here, I'm controlling the wrist. We're just going to start from the top. It's the easiest way to learn. A lot of Kimuras that I used to learn in the past, especially this one, it's a good one, but what happens is if we get the arm behind the back, a lot of it's a pushing force. And if I'm pushing a lot of times, I don't get my whole entire body behind it. It becomes like my arms and my hands working against somebody's arm. Where if I was trying to get Greg, he's a big, strong guy. If I had my arms locked around Greg, if I was just using my hands and my arms to push his arm, it'd be a lot tougher for me to finish. But if we can, instead of doing it with a pushing force, if I can change my angle and turn it into what we call a pulling Kimura. Look how my head's going away. You guys see this? Okay, so how do we get a pulling Kimura? Let's start from here. First, we're going to put the hand on the ground. You can grab like this for certain situations. Sometimes no thumb. A lot of people have a different preference. What I found out is that part doesn't matter as much as you would think. There's ways to do it both ways. Me, I prefer no thumbs because I can get a nice roll here. But if you had a combination of both or whatever, you can still break the arm. So that won't like make the move ineffective if you have your thumb. But I will say I like no thumbs. So let's put the hand on the mat. We're going to reach under the arm when I catch, I want to make sure, you see this gap in between my arm and his forearm right there? If that's there, it's no good. We're going to make sure there's no gap between my hands and his arm. You guys see that? I want this part of my arm down near the elbow for the pulling Kimura, because down near the end of the lever is where I'm trying to be, and you'll see in a second when we do this, I'm wanting to torque at the elbow. So the higher up here you are with this version of the Kimura, it's not going to be very good. Okay, if you're like this, see that big gap? That's really wrong. So we're going to go down near the elbow, connect our hands, no gap in between our wrist and his wrist, and ideally my grip is splitting his wrist. You see how my hand is right at the wrist joint? I want a little bit of both. If I'm just on the wrist, I'm not maximizing the end of the lever here. If I go up to the hand like this, you get kind of like a weak grip here. You guys see how that's too flexible? So we're going to split that wrist right there. No gap. Okay, now I need to change my angle. This elbow is going to go to the floor. I'm going to start turning my hips. The ideal position for my body is going to be 45 degrees from hip to shoulder. Boom. I'm here, I'm going to turn my hips. Notice I step above that shoulder. I'm going to take my leg out, and now watch. Where's his elbow? Is it near the shoulder line? If it's not, right there. Now I was pretty close already. But now I'm near the elbow, pinning the hand to the mat. Watch this. I'm going to start pushing or keeping the wrist where it is and leaning back, controlling the head with my leg, and you'll see that he's tapping already. It's pretty fast. If I was to adjust even more, now it's really bad. And as I lean back, he's already tapping. How tight is that?
It's super tight.
If I was to keep leaning, guys, that's my whole entire body going into that. I'm putting my weight into it. And just remember that as I'm doing this, I'm pushing this wrist, and as I lean, I'm sliding that hand even higher up to the shoulder line. Does that make sense? So you're doing a little leaning back motion there. Wrist, split the grip. Under the upper arm, don't have a gap between your hands. Make strong wrists. I'm going to walk my hip to the shoulder. See how I put my hip on the shoulder? Stepping over the head. Now I'm going to adjust to the shoulder line if I need, and I keep pushing that hand to the shoulder line as I start to lean back with my grip at the elbow. Make sense? Let's try it. I'll let you guys kind of pick your partner. Ready? 1, 2.